welcome to another edition of Couldn't Put It Down. So today is not going to be a 5-star review by any means, which I kind of love, but I also kind of hate, because I hate not liking a book, and I hate giving you bad reviews, but it's not personal. I mean, it's personal taste. I mean, I guess it can be. It is personal. What am I talking about? Writing is personal, and normally I don't like a book because it is not well done, and that's personal. That's not my taste. That's just you did a poor job. So today I'm going to be talking about How to Hang a Witch by Adriana, which let me read you the description because it sounds amazing. Like, I don't know about you, but the Salem witch trials they're just incredibly intriguing, and that's probably why I watched Sabrina the Teenage Witch, because I just thought it was so interesting, even though Sabrina the Teenage Witch had nothing to do with the Salem witch trials, aside from, like, one episode where they were in Salem. So, it's, the Salem witch trials meets Mean Girls. Like, how much better can you get? You could get a whole lot better, honestly. This book, I do not know why it's a New York Times bestseller, or why so many people on Goodreads gave it favorable reviews. Like, I thought it was so boring and incredibly shallow. Like, it's not the Salem witch trials meets Mean Girls. It's Mean Girls with a little bit of Salem witch trials mixed in. We've already got Mean Girls, and that was funny. And this is not intended to be funny. This is intended to be paranormal and suspenseful, and she just completely missed the mark. For a very brief review, or a very brief synopsis, it's about a girl named Sam, who her father is in a coma, and so she and her stepmother moved from New York to Salem because that is where her father is from. And I don't know why they decide to move to Salem. I mean, there are hospitals in New York, but for whatever reason, her stepmother decides to move them to Salem and, move the father to a hospital in Boston, which I think is 2 hours away, which, again, New York with a nearby hospital, or Salem, where there is no nearby hospital. And it wasn't for the reason of, well, this is a better hospital for comatose patients. No, it's just, basically it suited the author's needs. Anyways, so they moved to Salem, and weird things start to happen around Sam. She is automatically hated by every single person in her school, including teachers. And there is this one clique called the Descendants, because they are direct descendants of the witches that were hung in Salem. And, of course, they rule the school, and they hate Sam because she's a Mather, which this goes, I guess, is a direct factual correlation with the Salem witch trials. Because, and I'll get into the last name thing, because if you notice, the author's last name is Mather. Anyways, so apparently Cotton Mather was a historical figure in the Salem witch trials, but he was not a good historical figure. He was the guy who hung them, who sentenced them to death. So they hate her. Everybody hates her because of her last name. Nobody gives her a chance. They automatically hate her, which I just think is outrageous. It's just too easy, She meets her next door neighbor, who is the only friendly person in town, and her son, who I guess is the only friendly teenager in town. And then she starts seeing a ghost. And then it's like, well, now I have to solve the mystery of why all these people keep dying. And there you go. And then in the end, spoiler alert, so if you don't want the spoiler, do something. Her stepmother is the villain. I have feelings about that. My biggest issue, as I said, this book just was not interesting. I thought, as I said, it was just too easy. Like as I said, everybody in this town hates her for no reason, essentially. I mean, I understand a grudge, but it was like the author just wanted a reason for her to be an outcast, and so she said, Everybody's gonna hate her. We're gonna leave it at that. We're not gonna give any dimension whatsoever. And then that goes into the fact that apparently she has been a lone wolf her entire life. So this book is so melodramatic. Like, I've never had any friends. My dad is basically the only person who loves me. My mom died when I was born. I'm cursed. Like, my grandmother, I never had a relationship with her. Nobody loves me. Everybody hates me. Wah, wah, wah. However, as soon as she moves to Salem, it's like 2 weeks in, she starts dating the neighbor boy. Tell me, how does that fit together? Somebody who can't even manage to keep a friend, much less catch the attention of a boy, starts dating, like, the incredibly good-looking next-door neighbor who's the only nice person to her in the whole entire town, aside from his mother. So, for me, this, I thought, aside from the really cliched and poorly executed romance, like, there are no feels there, people. You will not say, I want them to be together. You're gonna say, why are they dating? They're so boring. There's nothing that you could see would be attracting them to each other. Anyways, initially I did like this whole friendly neighbor angle, because I was thinking, well, maybe it's a red herring. Maybe these are gonna be the bad guys, like all the people who hate her for no reason. They're awful, they're mean girls, but they're not evil. They're not antagonists, or they're not the villain. They're not going to be to blame. No, like, very quickly it was established they're just nice. I mean, honestly, because it was like a week in, and the only person who Sam had revealed her father's state to was Jackson, the neighbor boy. And then the next thing she knows, the descendants are taunting her with that. And so she's like, oh, well, I can't trust Jackson. So, like, there we go. All right, like, we've got some tension here. And like, this is, I think, maybe afternoon 1. And then afternoon 2, they iron things out. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to tell anybody. I didn't think that I was trying to defend you by telling them how bad your life sucks. I didn't think they'd use it against you. And then he's like, and why do you think I'm so nice to you? Because I like you. Smooch, smooch, kiss, kiss. We're all good. Is that exciting to you? Because that is not exciting to me. Like, there was nothing, I mean, literally, there was nothing in this romance to build up to. He was nice to her. He spoke to her. He volunteered to be her project for an assignment. And then they started dating after one misunderstanding. And I was like, that was the only thing that was keeping me going. Well, that was one of 2 reasons that were keeping me going. The other was, the thing about the descendants is they all wear black, which is how you can recognize them. And there is this one guy that she keeps bumping into who, I guess, is another love interest. He's like, oh, who she can end up with. But he's not very nice to her, and she's just assuming he's a descendant. Come to find out, he's a ghost. Okay, in theory, I don't have any problem with this. His name is Elijah. I have no problem with Elijah as a ghost. I mean, hello, we're dealing with Salem witch trials. It's touted as a paranormal novel. Like, I can accept a ghost. But again, there is no build-up, no suspense as to who is he? What's wrong with him? She literally bumps into him in the hall once. And then when she is being teased by the descendants, She yells at him, and then the next thing you know, he's in her room, covering her mouth, threatening her or whatever. I don't remember, because this book was so boring. It was really hard to pay attention to, and I just kept skipping. But that is what really, like, the first turn off, like, major turn off, aside from just being bored. I was like, how can this guy just show up in her room? I mean, she had been having instances where things were not where they were supposed to be, and she was finding creepy rooms and, you know, finding hidden letters. So there are little things, and like she got locked in a library room. And so there are little things where you're like, is it imagination? Are the descendants actually witches? What's going on? Is there a ghost in her house? So Mather tried to plant seeds, but she was very unsuccessful. Because it was, again, everything was so blatantly obvious. You know, the first day that Sam moves into her house, she comes into her room and her stuff is all over the floor. I mean, I will accept that it's a ghost. I will. But on the very first day, when there has been nothing to build that ambiance into thinking maybe there's something creepy about this house, except for the fact that it's 300 years old. Like, there's really nothing there for me to automatically say, oh, it's a ghost, except for the fact that all the clothes are on the floor when there's only 2 people in the house and neither one of them could have done it. You know, just too obvious, especially for a ghost story. Like, there's supposed to be suspense. You know, you're supposed to ask questions, and there's none of that. So yeah, Sam, she's in her room. Her stepmother has just left. And the next thing you know, there's this guy is in her room? Like, did he pass her stepmother in the hallway? I mean, like, that's what I'm saying, is we don't know he's a ghost yet. And there's nothing to indicate there's anything abnormal about him, yet he's in her room. You know, she doesn't hear a window open. She doesn't hear floorboards creak. You know, there's nothing to clue her into the fact that there could be someone in her room before we know he has other means of getting into her room. And it just kind of went downhill from there, where I just... it's kind of hard for me to talk about this book because I skipped so much of it that there's a lot I just couldn't tell you. But I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed to say that I skipped 90% of this book because there was nothing worth reading. Every time I would stop, I'm pretty good at judging when like plot points are gonna occur, or like pinch points, or just exciting bits of the novel, parts where they'll give you information, not necessarily spoilers, but information, moments where things are going to happen, you'll get backstory, just whatever. I'm just really good at pinpointing those moments. It just never happened. It was like, I guess if you want to say show versus tell, it was just tell. Which, on another tangent, initially, I was very impressed by the narration because it was the narrator. And I don't know about you, because I don't know how many audiobooks you have listened to, but I've listened to quite a few. And I think the most impressive author narrator I've ever heard is Neil Gaiman. I mean, he's amazing. And so I was like, wow, you know, this girl, I'm kudos, you know? And then I just did some research, and turns out she's an actress. So I was like, okay, now I understand why she's so good. Well, then Elijah shows up and actually speaks. You know, up until the point he shows up in her bedroom, he's just a figure, a cute guy in the hallway, who may or may not be an evil descendant. For anybody who has no clue about history, Salem witch trials occur in the late 1600s, meaning they don't sound like this. You know, they have that British air to them. Her depiction as an actress of that accent was horrendous. And it's not just that it sounded nothing like it should. It was sounded more like he had mental problems, like he was slow. With that, he was not an engaging, it just wasn't an engaging voice to listen to. It was like he could not get a sentence out. It's like, no, I don't think so. Does that sound like someone from the 1690s to you? I'm not even going to attempt it because I'm not an actress. All right, like maybe my sister could because she spent some time in London. Not I. The closest I've come is Doctor Who, so I'll save you that. But would you want to listen to somebody who sounds very robotic for any length of time? No. From there, I was like, don't want to listen because this book sucks. Don't want to listen because it's like gouging out my brain, like gouging out my eardrums every time you put on Elijah's voice. And then, all right, so I've said I'm okay with the ghost aspect. And I'm very intrigued by the Salem witch trials. So with that in mind, I can accept a certain amount of, I guess, witchcraftery. I love Harry Potter, and I don't see anything wrong with the witch wizard aspect in Harry Potter. Of course, there are the evil witches and wizards, but it's not like witchcraft. It's more like magic. This, we get to, like, the very, kind of the end, where it's the resolution, she's about to fight the bad guy, and she has gotten her hands on a spell book. So we are legit getting into witchcraft. I take issue with that. It might not bother you, but it did bother me. For one, again, it wasn't interesting. She did not execute well. It was like step by step, and let's put a couple thoughts in between here so that, you know, it's not just like a talking head about getting ingredients together. But I was really bothered by kind of how in depth she got with actual witchcraft. And Sam goes to the haunted cabin because the whole thing is the town thinks they know where the hangings took place, but they don't actually know. For a town who hates Sam on sight by virtue of her last name, you'd think they'd have their facts straight. They would say, for certain, that's where the witches were hung. They don't. And she, you know, comes across things here and there that lead her to the proper location. And it can be seen from this house. You know, there are obviously details I'm unacquainted with because I skipped them. So maybe there were little bits and pieces woven in there about her stepmother Vivian and about this house, which, again, the first time she goes to see it, Jackson comes with her, her boyfriend, and he, who has lived in Salem his entire life, says, I think after they found it, I'm surprised we actually found this house because nobody's ever actually come out here to find it. Why not? Like, everybody knows this haunted house is here, but it's basically a myth. Like, you don't know whether it's real or not. Anyways, so she goes to this house and she finds the female descendants all hanging from nooses, and she is expecting to encounter the crow woman, the old crow woman, who is the villain. Can't tell you how she came across that information because It was part of all the parts I missed. Turns out it's her stepmother, which I actually liked this. I thought it was completely out of the blue because the entire novel, like all the parts that I read, she was a non-entity. And that was something that actually stood out to me. That she felt like an adult figure who was there in name only. Like she had no purpose except Sam needed a parent. She needed someone to live with. And so when it was then Vivian, I was like, who was the villain, I was just confused. Because I felt, and maybe it was all the parts that I skipped, that she actually was present, but I just felt like she could have been built up better. Mather excused it as soon as Sam's father went into a coma, her relationship with her stepmother soured, and that's why they no longer interacted. I think that's an excuse. Again, like the entire book is just one big cliche, one massive stereotype. And so yeah, she meets up with Vivian, and Vivian threatens to kill people, and the whole thing is she blames Sam, or Sam's ancestors, Cotton, for the death of her beloved Elijah, who I guess she kept him in a limbo. I don't know. Again, missed a lot. Not ashamed. So yeah, and she, over the last 300 years, people had been dying because she had been trying to figure out a way to bring Elijah back, because he had killed himself, essentially, to get away from her. Or he had killed himself. I think probably his sister, who I guess has a kind of major role and was slightly interesting in the beginning, but it took far too long to really get into anything. So anyways, so I think his sister, she was involved in a relationship with somebody above her stature, and I think from there she was accused of witchcraft, probably just to get her out of the way, because his family, whoever's family thought, that's the best way to get rid of her. So I think Elijah blamed Cotton for his sister's death, and therefore he killed himself, and I think it also had to do with Vivian. I don't know. Convoluted. And so over the last 300 years, she had been working out a way to bring him back from the dead, and eventually realized that she can't do it because she was not the direct cause of his death. So she needed a Mather to bring him back from the dead. Wouldn't you know it, he fell in love with Sam, and Sam fell in love with him. I just can't. There are some things that I can accept. That is not one. Like falling in love with a ghost without any possibility for resurrection. I mean, like, it's the HEA, the happily ever after. Like, we need to know there can be a happily ever after. So for them to fall in love when he hates her in the beginning, I just thought, again, out of left field, but at the same time, completely obvious. Like, you knew it was going to happen. I was not, he did not endear, he was not endearing to me because his speech patterns were so painful. And I would like to read the book to see if it flowed any better in the written text, which I highly doubt because the book was not written well. I mean, I thought this book was self-published, which, no offense to any self-published authors. I've read a lot of really well-written, well-executed self-published books, but a lot of times self-published authors don't have the access to the feedback, the beta readers, the critique, the editors, and so their books are not properly finished. They're not properly executed, not the best written, because they have nobody to tell them that they need to fix it. And so there's a lot of really cheesy writing out there. And that is what I thought this book was. I thought this was a book by somebody who could not find an agent and a traditional publisher. It's not! She is traditionally published. Please, somebody. Okay, on a scale from 0 to Twilight, which Twilight, we all know my feelings on Twilight. Twilight's like a 2. So basically on a scale from 0 to 2, this is like a -10. I mean, Twilight is War and Peace compared to this. So anyways, as we all know, she defeats the bad guy, and Elijah, because there's a second book on an unrelated subject, but with same characters, and he's in that, I guess he does not, like, move on. Which, again, I don't understand. Like, if he was trapped in this form, on this plane, because of Vivian, and now Vivian's gone, why is he still here? You know, if his sister has come and, you know, kind of given her blessing of, you know, everything's okay and I love you, like, what's his unfinished business? Maybe because he's in love with Sam? I don't know. And then the book's over, and the dad obviously wakes up because he was under Vivian's spell. I can't say enough bad things about this book. Actually, let me move on. I talked about how the author, Adrian Mather, has the same last name as Sam. And at first, I was like, excuse me? Can we talk about egos for a minute? Like, let's name characters after ourselves? But it turns out that Adrian Mather actually has roots. She is related to Cotton Mather. So I gave her grace. I said, I'll take it, because this is not about you. This is about the Salem witch trial. This is about history. And I guess instead of creating a fictional character within the Salem realm, she decided to actually pull from history, which is cool. But still, 2 thumbs down. Like, people just don't pick it up. And the next one, I mentioned, it is about the Titanic, which this story makes sense because the Salem witch trials were set where? In Salem. How can we talk about the Titanic in Salem? According to reviews, she does better in that book than this book. And she makes it work. I think it's something about dreams. I don't know. I guess Sam, aside from being a descendant of an actual witch, or not, she's not a descendant of a witch, but of a witch hunter. Prophetic? I mean, not really prophetic since it happened in the past, but she has supernatural powers of some sort. She can communicate with the dead. But anyways, I guess Jackson is back, and Elijah is back, and all the haters who don't hate her anymore, I guess she's now besties with the descendants. I mean, there was stuff in the book about them, you know, coming to terms with each other. But I would not even... I actually think I had the second book on my list to read first. And I think I read this one because I could actually get it on audiobook. But I wouldn't mess with it. DNF, people. DNF this book. Like, take it off your TBRs. It's not worth it. I guess maybe there's supposed to be more in this series. I wouldn't read those. I wouldn't read anything this woman writes. I'm just appalled that people liked it. You know, although I would love to hear if you liked it. And part of me wonders if it's just it's just below my reading level. But I don't think so, because I read a lot of young adult, and there can be really well-written young adult, and this just isn't. It has a great premise, poorly executed. It will fail every time. Hope you enjoyed that rant. See you later!